Welcome, this is Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm sharing an idea for creating a background using sentiment stamps. Let's face it, we have lots of stamp sets, and in each of those stamp sets there are often many sentiments, and a lot of them go unused. So today is about putting them to good use and incorporating them into our background. I have done videos with using sentiments in the background before. This one's a little bit different, but at the end of this video, I will link to the others if you're looking for more ideas. I have 3 cards for you, but better yet, I'm going to share additional ideas at the end of the video. So let's get started with creating these 3 cards. I did want to mention that in today's video, I'll be using my Altenew stamp wheel, which is a great stamp positioner. However, you could do today's technique with any stamp positioner, such as a Misty stamping tool or an acrylic block. I just like to switch between the Misty and the stamp wheel now and then because both are great tools. I also like that the stamp wheel has a sticky surface on the inside that will hold your paper in place as you do stenciling and stamping, so you'll see me use that throughout the video. However, you could use whatever tools you may have, and you'll see that would work with a variety of things. I just wanted to mention that before we got started. Okay, now for the first step on these backgrounds, I'll be doing some stenciling and embossing folder. This is the Altenew Whimsy Motif bundle. Now you can buy these separate or together, but there is an embossing folder and a set of layering stencils. I will demonstrate using them together and separately just to show you the different options you have. There are lots of great products like this on the market, and I'm hoping you have something in your stash that would give similar results. I have a piece of white cardstock here, and I'm misting up both sides with a bit of water, and then I'll put it into that embossing folder. Notice that I'm positioning it so that my white cardstock kind of hangs out the bottom because I want my floral arrangement to be at the top left of my cardstock panel instead of centered. Now you definitely could do this centered if you wanted to. I just wanted that focal point up in the top left. So once I've put this into the embossing folder, I will run it through my die cut machine, just following the manufacturer's instruction for using a 3D embossing folder. With this Spellbinders Platinum machine, that means the platform, your embossing folder, and then the D plate on top. But again, just follow the manufacturer's instructions for a 3D embossing folder. By the way, you could do this technique with 2D embossing folders too. And look at that beautiful floral arrangement we get on the top of our white cardstock. Because I did mist that with water, I will heat set it before we add any ink to it. Now it's time to do some stenciling. I will stencil over this embossing folder background, and then I will also stencil 2 other flat backgrounds so that I can create 3 cards at once. But let's start with this embossing folder background, the white background, and add stenciling on top because these stencils coordinate with that embossing folder. I've put my background onto the sticky mat in my stamp wheel, and now I'll take the first stencil. I have the number 1 up in the top left corner so I know it's aligned correctly, and all I have to do is shift it left and right. I don't need to rotate it at all, and I know that if I just move it up and down, left or right, I will eventually line it up with that embossed pattern underneath. It's very easy to do, and I like that Altenew has positioned these so that if you just line it up straight with your cardstock, you should have no problem. Now over this, you could do any type of inking you want with any inks and any ink blending tool you want. But I'm using Altenew Fresh Dye inks because I love these inks and I love the colors so much. You could absolutely make these flowers one color, maybe using a light and a dark pink ink. But I thought it'd be fun to do a 2-tone flower. So I have chosen Tickled Pink and Coral Red. And I'm doing the Tickled Pink pretty heavy towards the base of my petals, and then the Coral Red on the outside edge of the petals. But here's the thing, it really doesn't matter if you get the colors in the right spot. Really all I'm doing is making sure there's a little bit of pink and a little bit of that red over each opening on this stencil. And I'm making sure that the 2 colors overlap. If you overlap your colors, you'll get a nice blend from the pink to the coral color, and it'll give beautiful results. Also, don't spend too much time blending. Blending can be very forgiving, especially if you're using a dye ink like this, because it will dry and blend in on its own. Once I'm done, I'll take a dry cloth to clean off my stencil and I will remove that one. And we have the first layer on top of this embossing folder background. And remember, those petals that we inked line up with the embossed petals we created earlier. Now I have another piece of white cardstock of the same size, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I'm holding it behind the one we just inked and sliding it under the stencil. Once I have the inking lined up with the stencil, I'll remove the one we just inked. And now we can ink on that plain white cardstock that's behind it. The reason I did that is I wanted my inked flowers to be in the same spot on each of my backgrounds. This will make the next step of this technique where we add the sentiments much easier. There are other ways you could do this, but basically I'm trying to ink the flowers on this panel in the same spot I inked them on my last panel. However, this one does not have the embossing folder on it. This is just a plain piece of cardstock, and I wanted to show you that you could use these stencils without the folder if you wanted to. Now over this one, I'm doing like a purplish blue along with an aqua color. We have Alpine Aster and Aqualicious. And again, I'm putting some of the blue color on like half of the openings and then the Aqualicious on the other half of the openings, allowing those inks to overlap to blend. Once I'm done, I can use a dry cloth to remove that excess ink, and then I can remove that cardstock piece. Now I want to do a third one where the flowers will be inked in the same exact spot. So here's the trick that I'll do. I will take that first background with the embossed flowers on it, and I will line that up with my stencil. So you can see I'm lining it back up there. And then I'm taking my third piece of cardstock, just plain flat white cardstock, lining it up behind that cardstock piece, press all this onto my sticky mat, removed our ink piece, and now I'll be able to stencil in the same spot on this white background. And again, there's no embossing on this one. You don't really have to make sure they're lined up this well, but that's a trick if you do want them lined up in the same way. Now I use Be Grateful and Tickled Pink on this, so we have purple blending into pink. I'm trying to go vibrant with these colors. I really wanted to make vibrant flowers, but you definitely could go softer if you wanted to. I will say there's something really impactful about this purple blending into pink. At the end, it's just really catches your eye nicely. Okay, so now let's go back to the first one. This is the one that has the embossed pattern, and we're going to grab stencil number 2. If I line it up with my background so that the sides are parallel, I can just move it left and right and up and down, and eventually I'll get it to line up with the embossed pattern. But really at this point, with the second stencil, it'll line up with the inking that we've already done, which you'll see in my next example. Now I'm using the same colors of ink over the stencil. You could go lighter handed or darker handed if you want to. You could switch to other colors if you want to, but I decided to use the same 2 colors with about the same amount of inking over the second stencil, just like I did over the first. So once I've inked over that, I will mist this with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. I have a spray bottle for that, and wipe it clean before moving on to the next background. Remember, this background that I'm doing next does not have embossing on it. It's completely flat, but I'm able to take the second stencil and line it up with the inking I've already done, and I can easily see how this second stencil needs to be positioned. It's an easy one to follow. There are instructions that come with the stencils. I like that Altenew does that, but really it's not necessary here. It lines up very easily. Once again, I'm using the same purples and pink. You could change that up, but I really wanted to keep this a little simpler. I wanted to be able to make these 3 cards in an hour or 2, and so by sticking with the same colors, it was easier to do. Now onto the third background, which is once again flat, but I used the blues and the aqua inks. I've lined up the second stencil, just following the inking we had already done with the first stencil, and now I'm adding the same colors over that. So now we've done 2 layers of stencil. There is a third final one that we need to do to finish off the flowers. So once again, I'll just line it up with my background. You can see it's not turned in any way. It's just up and down straight like my background. And I just move it up and down until it lines up with the empty areas on my flowers. And I apply those same colors of ink. Now on some of these petals I went a little lighter handed and some I went a little heavier handed, but I used the same 2 colors on all the layers. So here's our first flat flower collection. We'll add the leaves in a moment. Now I'm going to give that a quick clean and switch to the other flat background. This is the one with the purple and pinks. Now, I did want to mention again, you could use any inks for this. You could use any inking tool for it. I really like these mini blending brushes from Altenew. I use them a lot in videos because the bristles are small, so I find that I'm able to control better where the color goes, and I can get really crisp, strong results. All right, so we did the third stencil there, and this is one of our flat backgrounds. I love those colors. I will clean off that stencil and then line it up with the background where we used the embossing folder. So this was actually the first one we started with, using the tickled pink and the coral red. So the other two backgrounds are flat. This one has the embossing folder added to it. I did want to mention that I like to do the embossing folder first and then the stenciling on top. Look how nicely the stenciling lines up with that texture. You could do it the other way around. For example, here I have the blue background. I haven't done the embossing folder yet. I can take this and put it into my embossing folder and line it up by looking through and run it through my die cut machine. But whenever I do this, I almost always find that my cardstock shifts a little bit and my embossing, that texture, the raised area, doesn't line up with my inking. And you can see there on that bottom flower, it's offset a bit. Now that's completely fine. It doesn't bother me at all, but I do find I get better results if I do the embossing folder first, then the stenciling on top, like I did for this pink and red background. Okay, so now I have two backgrounds that have texture and one that's flat. I just wanted to show you the comparison of doing the embossing folder, then the stenciling versus the other way around. All right, now over the fourth stencil, I'm just lining that up with the flowers. These give us some leaves in between and around the flowers. I'm doing two colors here, the Let Us Celebrate, which is one of my favorite green colors, and the olive color, which I'm putting more along the tips of the leaves. So that just adds a little more variation to our background. And then I'll move on to my next background, just lining that stencil up super easy so that the leaves are between the flowers. And I will once again add the two different colors of green ink. And then once done with that, I'll move on to my third background and add the leaves there too. I really like being able to make a few cards at once. I have all these products out, all these inks out, and I come up with one design. I might as well do multiples. So I ended up with 3 backgrounds here of these beautiful floral arrangements. The two on the left have the embossing folder texture added. The one on the right is flat and smooth. I don't know, I like both options, but there's something about that dimension that an embossing folder gives that really steps it up. I wanted to demonstrate this because there are more and more products coming out where there's an embossing folder and coloring stencils that coordinate. And I think it's really best to do the embossing folder first, then the stenciling on top. Okay, now it's time to do the fun sentiment technique where we fill around our flowers with sentiments. For this technique, I really encourage you to look through your stash and grab a mix of sentiments. But I thought I'd also show you that you can use a sentiment stamp set and mix and match all that's included. This is the new Altenew Greeting Stamp Set, and I am crazy about the style of this. I love these sentiments and the font used, and that there are tiny sentiments included also. This is a great set and will definitely be on my favorites list. There is also a coordinating die set available, which makes it even better. I'll go ahead and warn you now that I will definitely be overusing the stamp set for quite some time. Now, if you have the Spellbinders BetterPress system, which is a new faux letterpress system, they do have the Classical Sentiments BetterPress plates that you can use with your BetterPress system. And I'm excited to try this. I don't have them yet, but I can't wait to get them and use them. If you've never seen the BetterPress in action, I will link to that video up here on the top right. And keep in mind, you can use your BetterPress plates to do hot foiling. So you could hot foil these sentiments also. All right, now it's time to add these sentiments to our background. I thought I would design it so that the sentiments are around our flowers instead of overlapping them. So I'm going to fill in all of that white space with sentiments. I've put one of my backgrounds into the corner of my stamp wheel. You could also use a MISTI stamping tool here or whatever stamp positioner you have. Around the flower there in the bottom corner, I've placed some sentiments. I placed 2 big ones and 1 small one, as close as I could get to the flowers to fill in the white space. I'm going to do this in bits and pieces, so I'm doing a few sentiments and then we'll move on to others. But I'm starting out with these 3 sentiments, and I'm stamping them with a very light ink. This is Soft Lilac and the Crisp dye ink from Altenew. So I stamped it on that first one. Now I'm putting the next background in. This time I'm using the Blush Fresh ink and I'm stamping those images. Then I'll move on to my third one and I'll stamp with the light blue ink. So I'm doing this stamping on all three backgrounds. I could make a bunch of cards this way. This is definitely one of those techniques that lends to creating more than one card, because if you're going to take the time to position it, you might as well do more than one card. All right, so now I've done those first few sentiments and I'm moving above and below and filling in the space around it. You could actually do multiple stamps, almost all of that white space in one pass. But I find that if I do a few at a time, I get better positioning. I don't know, it just seems to work better for me. So I've positioned some more sentiment stamps around the ones we just stamped, really just filling in that white space. I kind of start in one corner and work my way out. Now I know one of these sentiments I haven't used yet, so I'm rubbing my finger over the surface of the stamps because I find that that will help the ink to take to the stamp better. And I also am going to practice stamping it first. So I put a piece of scrap paper in there over my stamped background, and now I'm just stamping on it just to test it out. It's stamped well, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp it onto my background. If you have a new stamp and you find that it's stamping a bit splotchy, I recommend rubbing your finger over the surface and then practice stamping it on scrap paper. If you give your stamps a little TLC before you expect them to stamp well, it will really give better results. Okay, so now I can go ahead and stamp the same images with that light blue ink on this background, and then move on to the next one. Stamp those same images with the blush ink on this background. So the stamps are staying in the same position and I'm just stamping on them all three. So that's a big time saver in the end. By the way, I made some of these stamps go horizontal and some of them go vertical just to kind of change things up and add some interest. You could also grab different sentiments from different stamp sets so they all have kind of a different look to them, and that would add more variety too. So now I've moved my cardstock down to the bottom corner and repositioned the stamps to fill in some of the leftover space. You can see up there at the top of my panel I needed to stamp some, and I'm just filling in all the white space around our flowers. Now I've done this kind of sentiment background technique in the past, but really it was to fill a background. I will link to that video up here on the top right and the end of this video if you wanted to see some more ideas. But this is just a fun way to add a little bit of interest to the white space on your card. Once I'm done, I am using a kind of an orangish color marker to color in the center of that flower. There's a stencil that does that, but I forgot to do it and I've already put my stencils away, so I just colored it with a pen. And then I am tracing over the embossed stems that connect these leaves using a green marker. Now I've got a bum shoulder, so I'm kind of shaky, but I think it works just fine. Now we can add these card panels, which are 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, onto a note card of the same size. Now here's a trick that I like to do. When there's an embossed background like these that I did with the embossing folder, I like to use double-sided adhesive sheets just to be sure that it stays nice and connected to the front of our card. So I cut a piece of Altenew double-sided adhesive sheet to be slightly smaller than my card panel, and I put it on the back of the card panel. I'll remove the release paper and I'll take my note card and put it in the corner of my stamp wheel. And then I'll take my card panel with the adhesive on the back and put that in the corner of my stamp wheel and then press them down together. That way I can be sure that it adheres straight, and that double-sided adhesive will be sure that it takes away any of the warping we may have, or it really just attaches around the dimension from that embossing folder. This is also a great trick if you have maybe a watercolor background that's warped. Put double-sided adhesive on the back of it and add it to the card that way. It really helps to flatten everything out. Now for my main focal point sentiment that I'll put right there at the center of the flowers, I'm using the new Altenew Timeless Sentiments Die Set, which again will be on my favorites list. It's the same style as the stamps we used, but these words are bigger. We have the words love, you, hugs, hello, thank you, and friend, and the shadow dies are included. I really like this set. So I chose hugs, hello, and friend to add to my 3 cards. For the words themselves, I wanted them to be sparkly. So I'm using the new Altenew Milky Way glitter paper pad. Now they have lots of glitter cardstocks and lots of beautiful colors, but this one's really fun because in it has white, silver, like this dark gray, black, and a sapphire color. And I'm going to use the dark silver. I just thought that was a fun change from using a plain silver. I've used the Altenew glitter papers a lot in my videos because there are so many color options. This just happens to be a newer one. Now for the pink and orange card, the one on the top right there, I did decide to use a gold for that. So I used like a warm gold from the Altenew Gilded glitter paper pad. So that's another option. I just thought this would give a little bit of shine to these cards. So I have my glitter words glued onto the white shadow die cuts, and I'm gluing those at the center of my flowers. Now, sometimes people ask me why I glue my sentiments on top of my flowers, kind of covering them up. That's because I feel like that's the focal point of the card, and I prefer to have my sentiment at the focal point. You could put your sentiment wherever you want, whatever makes you comfortable. I just feel like that's where my eye is drawn, and I think the sentiment is the most important part of the card, so that's where I want to place it. That's just something I've always done. I wanted to add some sequins, gems, or pearls to this, but I couldn't find anything in my stash that went nicely with the glitter sentiment, so I decided to make my own using the same glitter cardstock. I am using the Altenew Radial Circles cover die, which is over on the right. Any die that cuts a bunch of different size circles would work well here. And I cut that from white cardstock, so I have lots of different size white dots. And I'm gluing them around my sentiment. And I'll do that on all of my cards. Then after I glue the white little circle down, I'll glue a glitter one on top. The only reason I layered it up is so they would stand up a bit more for dimension and kind of pop out of our card a little bit. So I'm really making my own little sequins or embellishments here using that background die that you see on the right hand of the screen there. There are two big advantages of doing this. One is the little dots that I add, these little embellishments, will match perfectly with my sentiment, and there won't be much bulk to them, so it'll go through the mail nicely. So now we have our 3 completed cards. Now here's the first one where we did the inking first and then the embossing folder. So you can see it didn't line up just right, but I think it's okay in the end. I could have put my friend sentiment lower so I could cover up that bottom flower, but I think it's okay. And you can see the soft sentiments that we stamped around the background, just adding some fun and interest to this card. And this is a great technique for using those sentiments that maybe you have left unused in your stash. Notice that I used tiny little sentiments to fill in some of the gaps between the bigger sentiments. Now this one here, I didn't use the embossing folder, but you could see those stencils look beautiful without it too. But here's a side-by-side comparison. The one on the left doesn't have the embossing folder, the one on the right does, which does give it some fun texture. So there we have 3 cards using sentiments for a creative background. Now, I'll be honest, I had planned to do more cards in this video. I had them all planned out, but I went to physical therapy this morning and he told me I needed to take a couple days off of doing anything, so I can't make them, but I thought I'd share with you the idea I had in case you wanted to try them or it inspired you to use what you have creatively. Now, the first card I planned on doing was using these moth hot foil plates. There are also sentiments included. I was going to hot foil it and then color it in and then use the coordinating die to cut it out. Now, if you don't like hot foiling, there is also the Midnight Moth stamp set and there's a coordinating die set. You could use that for a similar look. I just really like that these are different than other products I already have. Now what I plan to do was take that foiled and die cut moth and put it top center on my background. But behind that, I was going to have a row of sentiments. So I was going to use the same sentiment stamp set because as I mentioned, I really liked it. And I was just going to line them up all going down the center of that background, just having them very close together and then maybe put a few of the smaller little sentiments kind of off to the side. So basically I would have a row of sentiments as you see me lining up here. Then that one that says have a beautiful day, I would stamp that with black, but the other sentiments with a light coloring, so they were kind of a backdrop. Then right above the have a beautiful day that would be in black, I would add my moth. Very simple card design, but that would allow that moth that be the focal point of the card and have all the shine, but we would have the interest of those multiple sentiments in the background. The other card that I had planned was using the Altenew Giraffes die set. This is a great die set. It gives kind of a realistic pair of giraffes, and it does even the spots for you. You don't have to cut out the spots. It does the layering on its own. You can see the die on the right cuts out those empty spots so the color will show through. I plan to have that line of stamps once again in the same position as before, stamp that all with light ink, and then put these 2 giraffes on it, and then put a small sentiment stamped underneath that. Then the third card I was going to do was the same thing, a row of those sentiments, and on top of it, I was going to do the Altenew Elephant die set. This is really cool because it has Altenew's keyhole system on it, which is a system where it cuts tiny little keyholes so you know how to line up each of your die cuts. And you get these 2 realistic looking elephants. I just thought those were so great. It would be nice against a sentiment background. So what I could have done is stamp all 3 backgrounds with these sentiments down the center, maybe in a light gray ink, but then do that different focal point on each. One the moth, one the giraffe, and one the elephant. So it's kind of a universal card design and a great way to stretch those sentiments. I'm sorry I wasn't able to share those cards. Maybe I will in a future video. Also, before we go, I did want to mention that Altenew now has labels for all of their ink pads. So if you are like me and like to have the side of your ink pads labeled, they have them available. It's color-coded and has the color name, and they have them for their mini ink cubes, their crisp dye inks, and even their new fresh round ink pads. I will link below to all their organizational labels that they have. Really helpful. I can't wait to put them on my ink pads. Haven't had a chance to do so, but you'll see those in future videos. All right, if you're interested in any of these products, I do have them linked below in my YouTube description. It's really easy to find it there. Or you can go to my blog where you can save and bookmark cards for future reference. At the end here, I'll link to the 2 other videos that I mentioned, one showing another idea for sentiment backgrounds, and the other how to use the BetterPress plates. I thank you for spending this time with me, and I will be back soon with another video after a couple days off, and I'll see you then.